Hi guys, it's me, Chazza and welcome to this weekend preview for the final European race of the 2023 season. And it is a Grand Prix event that we love very much. Not necessarily a Grand Prix that delivers classic races every single year, but yeah, as an event, it is absolutely brilliant. And of course, it is one of the most memorable races of the season usually. And it is, of course, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Of course, the pictures you're seeing on your screen are not from the Italian Grand Prix. Wasn't able to get the pictures from where I normally get them from for this stream. So, yeah, the pictures you're going to be seeing will be from the race last week in Holland, which, of course, ended up being quite a mental race in the end for drama at the start and the finish, and really throughout the entire race. Also, not sure if you guys know this, but the Dutch Grand Prix actually broke a record last week. It had the most overtakes in a Formula One race in history, breaking the record previously held, I think, by the 2016 Chinese Grand Prix. So, I mean, maybe that makes it race of the season. I still wouldn't say it was race of the season because in the middle of the race it wasn't really that great. But in terms of drama, yeah, it was definitely right up there. And I'd say probably the most exciting Dutch Grand Prix we've had since we returned in 2021. Yeah, this weekend is Monza. Of course, it is all about power this weekend and who has the most of it. You're full throttle around this lap here at Monza for about 80% of the lap. So not much for the drivers to do, not much for the downforce of the cars really to do to affect the overall lap time of the cars themselves. So yeah, it's going to be, I think, qualifying will definitely be very exciting because again, 80% of the lap full throttle. It should be a very close qualifying session really throughout, Q1, Q2, Q3. The race, to be honest, will probably just be maybe a slightly above average race. I'm not expecting anything special this weekend because if you look at the last couple Italian Grand Prix that have been memorable, say 2020 and 2021, they've been memorable more so for crashes or, collisions between drivers more so than actual, great racing on track. So, yeah, that's what we're going to need to rely on if we're going to get an exciting, memorable Italian Grand Prix. It'll probably just end up being like last year's race where we had quite a bit of overtaking, but not really that much going on overall. But let's hope that I am wrong. Just wanted to say as well, before we get properly into this preview, obviously hope you guys watching are doing well. And no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best time as possible. And of course, in this preview, we'll go through the usual stuff, looking at the map of the track, getting into the sector times from previous tracks that are similar or have similar parts of their track to similar parts or parts of the Monza circuit, just to get an understanding of what the pace is probably going to be like this weekend, or what the pecking order should be from top to bottom. Then, of course, I'll get into my early predictions for qualifying and the race. And then we'll go through the teams in a bit more depth. And I'll get into, of course, in a bit more depth as to how they'll get on. In terms of upgrades, that's not really going to be a story this weekend because obviously aero, not important here at Monza. The only upgrades you'll get really is circuit-specific ones such as low downforce front and rear wing. Stuff like that. Next round of upgrades is going to be in Singapore. We know Red Bull have confirmed they're bringing an upgrade for the Singapore Grand Prix in 2.5 weeks. Ferrari probably as well, and probably McLaren, I would imagine, will be bringing something in Singapore. So, yeah, that'll be the next race really to look out for that stuff. But again, this weekend, it's all about straight line speed when it comes to the performance of the cars. Plus, of course, certain drivers will make their usual difference. But yeah, let's just get straight into it. Of course, as well, there is a poll running in the chat, as usual. And the question I've asked you guys is, can Williams finish on the podium this weekend at the Italian Grand Prix? Given how quick they were in Holland in the dry, and they were with Alex Albon for quite a long time running in 6th place, the pace was quite strong, you know, in qualifying and the race. I don't think it's impossible at all for Williams to, you know, not finish on the podium. I think it's absolutely a possibility this weekend. Still going to be very difficult because Ferrari should be very competitive. Red Bull, of course, with both drivers should be competitive. And plus you've got, you know, some other really great drivers out there that will, of course, try to snatch that podium. But they can replicate the type of pace we're expecting / hoping. You never know. They could end up on the podium. They haven't been on the podium, Williams, of course, since Spa. Of course, that race, though, didn't really happen. So the last podium before them was, I think, Baku 2017, which was, 6.5 years ago. Incredible. Anyway, before we move on to this weekend's Grand Prix, let's just have a look at the championship standings after that Dutch Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen is now 138 points clear of Sergio Perez. He's getting very close now to wrapping up officially the Drivers' Championship, his 3rd consecutive Drivers' title, 3rd overall, of course, as well. What race will he wrap that championship up at? If he keeps this, up? I'm just trying to think what race. Hold on. It's, probably going to be Qatar at the earliest, I think. Perez would have to have, really, for the next, say, 2-3 races, a really terrible time for Max to get it wrapped up in this coming month of September. Of course, today's the last day of August, at least here in the Western hemisphere. So yeah, what do you call it? Yeah, it's probably going to be Qatar in the first week of October still, where he wraps up the championship. Maybe at the absolute latest, if his consecutive win run and soon to be, you'd think, record of consecutive wins, if they come to an end pretty shortly, then maybe he'll win it at the US Grand Prix in Austin, Texas. But yeah, most likely the Qatar Grand Prix will be in it's like 6 weeks from now, I think, maybe 5 weeks from now, that race. So yeah, we'll see when he officially gets it done. Sergio Perez in 2nd, Fernando Alonso in 3rd, only 12 points clear of Lewis Hamilton in 4th. Carlos Sainz jumps up 2 places to P5, of course helped by Leclerc retiring with a broken floor, and Russell finishing last after having contact with Lando Norris towards the end of the Dutch Grand Prix. So that's great for Sainz, and he's only, surprisingly to me, 54 points behind Hamilton. That's quite a small gap considering how great Hamilton's been this season and how, not bad, but just how average Carlos Sainz has been. The only thing Carlos has been good at this year is consistency, but the thing is, he's been consistently average during 2023. And then you got Leclerc 6th, Russell 7th, Lando Norris a bit closer in 8th, but still going to take a few races to get really overtaking Leclerc and Russell in the championship. Lance Stroll 9th, and Pierre Gasly into the top 10 of the championship after that brilliant podium in Holland. What a drive in Holland as well. Was so quick throughout the entire Grand Prix, and he did deserve the podium. Perez, of course, who ended up dropping to 4th after that penalty. He had a pretty poor race showing, I thought, and was all over the place, really, when it came to the last, say, 3rd of that race. And Gasly, only 1 point ahead of Esteban Ocon in the championship. And Ocon is level on points now with Oscar Piastri. So only 1 point separating 10th, 11th, and 12th in the championship. You would imagine after this race, if McLaren, can have a settled weekend where they don't make any big mistakes like what we saw back at Zandvoort, McLaren probably will be good enough to allow Oscar Piastri to re-enter the top 10 of the championship. So we'll see how that goes down. And then on the constructors' side, Red Bull are now 245 points clear of Mercedes. Incredible gap. And they're probably 6 to 8 weeks away from wrapping up the constructors' title. Red Bull, Aston Martin, of course, did close the gap to Mercedes after the last Grand Prix. 40 points now the gap. I still think Mercedes will beat Aston Martin because of, I think Aston Martin still haven't quite got a car that is going to be super quick compared to Mercedes around all tracks. Plus, Aston Martin have only got really one driver able to score points for them on a consistent basis. So, Mercedes, I'm pretty confident will finish in second. I've got to say, I think people have overreacted a lot to what happened at Zandvoort for Mercedes. I know the strategy decisions by them were really poor, and they deserve criticism for it, but people are laying into them as if they're fighting for the championship. The first time they've got it majorly wrong on strategy in quite a few races, so not quite sure why people are overreacting so much. Aston Martin, third. Ferrari, 14 points behind now in fourth, but given how Ferrari should be, theoretically, much faster than Aston Martin here at Monza, I think there's a good chance that Ferrari could maybe just draw level with Aston Martin in the championship, if not just about sneak ahead going into Singapore. McLaren in fifth. They're really going to have really consistent, great results now for the final 9 races because, they're now 106 points behind Aston Martin. And Aston Martin definitely have improved with that new upgrade, that new floor that they brought at Zandvoort. Of course, though, that new floor we're not going to see any benefit from that this weekend because this weekend is not about, downforce. So we won't really see Aston Martin as competitive as we saw in Holland. We won't see that again until Singapore in a couple of weeks' time, where they should be probably top 3 teams, you'd say, Aston Martin. Maybe 4th in qualifying in Singapore, but definitely top 3 in the race. Alpine, a lot further clear of the teams behind now in 6th. Not too far behind McLaren, but McLaren obviously should finish in 5th. Williams in P7, now 4 points clear of Haas. And given how quick Williams are at the minute, you'd think Williams, there's really no chance that Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri can pass them in the championship. So, what a season for Williams, climbing up to 7th, which again would be their best finish in the championship since 2017, where they finished in 5th that year. They did finish in 2021 8th, of course. So they've been on the road to getting back into the midfield for a couple years now, and finally they're a consistent midfield outfit. That's the championship standings. Let's now get into the map of the track itself. This track, as you can see, is not really that. I think for racing drivers, I have to clarify, it's not that hard to drive. Of course, you do have 2 very slow chicanes of turn 1 and 2, plus turn 4 and 5 that you really have to brake well and be good on the the brakes to not go deep at those chicanes, which of course we do see quite a bit. But you look at the track, most of it is flat out. I think it's around 80% of the lap is flat out. So again, it's not the most difficult circuit. The drivers don't really make a difference here. The only corners really the drivers can make a difference is, I would say, Parabolica, sorry, of course, of turn 11. And then, of course, the Ascari chicane of turn 8, 9, and 10. Again, that's only really where the drivers can make a difference. It's about the car here at Monza and how good your straight line speed is, how little drag you have, and the teams that have the least drag and the best straight line speed, of course, will be having a definitely quite a bit better weekend than what we saw a week ago, if not a great weekend for them. So yeah, pretty simple track. And the sectors I have decided to use just to get an understanding of who could be, say, in what position this weekend and how the pecking order should shape up. Let me go to these sectors quickly. So this sector is the first sector from Zandvoort. Of course, the last Grand Prix we went to. Zandvoort, of course, overall is an aero-heavy circuit, but the first sector is mostly full throttle. Obviously, you're full throttle going into turn 1, and then you're flat out through turn 2, just about. Turn 3, of course, you slow down for, and then you're flat out all the way until turn 7. McLaren were actually pretty impressive through there. Williams, though, as you can see, very quick compared to Mercedes and Aston Martin. Nearly 0.2 of a second quicker. Just shows you that when flat out, that Williams is stunningly quick. Ferrari were surprisingly slow, even though, of course, Carlos Sainz was the one in Zandvoort in qualifying doing their best sectors. Leclerc, we know, could have done quite a bit better than Sainz if Leclerc had not crashed. Yeah, Ferrari's pace still was a bit surprising in how poor it was in that first sector. So definitely, Red Bull, of course, they'll be super strong in all the sectors. Williams, definitely watch out for them. But also, when it comes to, say, the middle sector, where you've got a couple of important corners, the two Lesmo corners, look out definitely for teams like McLaren, who we know, we've seen last few races, aerodynamically, they've got one of the best cars on the grid, so definitely watch out for them. And also, I have taken the first sector times from the Austrian Grand Prix to get a good understanding for the first and final sector, who should be quick through there. Of course, sorry. Of course, for the first sector in Austria, you only have one real corner, which is turn 1. The rest of the first sector in Austria is completely flat out, and Austria is also a similar circuit in how, low downforce it can be in the first, say, 3 quarters of the lap. Red Bull and Ferrari, as you could see, were equal through that first sector. Mercedes, definitely watch out for them this weekend. I think they could be a bit surprising in their performance, because I remember back in Austria, and we have also seen it earlier times this season, that their lower downforce wings, especially the lower downforce rear wing on the Mercedes, is actually quite good. So they might be a bit stronger than you expect, and than we expect because of that. Of course, we'll have to see in reality tomorrow in practice how they're looking with that. Williams, of course, very competitive, and they were quicker than McLaren and Aston Martin. Haas F1 were looking pretty decent compared to their midfield rivals. Alpine were quite slow. Of course, the first sector, quite short in Austria. Then Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri, the 2 slowest teams, and they should be the 2 slowest teams this weekend because their car just does not work around really high-speed circuits. But in the midfield, Williams, they're not going to be a midfield team this weekend. I think they'll be a front-running team, really. And then with Haas and Alpine, that'll be a close fight. Haas in qualifying should be quicker. I hope we don't see as bad of a performance from them as what we saw in Holland, because in Holland, they were horrendous. That car looked like it was miles off every other car throughout the field. So, yeah, hoping for a better performance here in Monza. But you get, you can see with these set times, a bit of a pattern forming. And for the circuit, again, the teams that normally have a very good straight line speed, such as Red Bull, Ferrari, Williams, Mercedes to a certain extent with their lower downforce wings, Haas as well. When they're firing, they tend to have a pretty good speed around low downforce tracks. So yeah, those are definitely the teams to more so look out for this weekend at Monza. And well, there's not really much to get into when it comes to the track overall, because again, it's a pretty simple circuit. Some classic corners, of course. Again, Ascari chicane, Parabolica, the first chicane, the second chicane, the Lesmos, incredibly famous corners. But yeah, it's not, again, the hardest track in the world. One thing I did want to quickly look at, though, is the rumored track changes, because what do you call it? I think they're going to be changing the layout of Monza next year, is it? Let me just see if I remember this year or so ago that they were going to turn the Lesmo corners back to what they used to be, which were high-speed corners. But I'm not sure if that's happening anymore. Let me have a quick look just to see. Monza track changes. The projects for asphalt and underpass renewal are now defined. 3 underpasses between the 2 main straights and the parabolic will be renewed and expanded. Can't see anything. Yeah, there was, I'm pretty sure it was a year or 2 ago where we heard, and I'm pretty sure it was, they announced that the 2 Lesmo corners, again, they were going to revert it back to, how it used to be, where, it was a lot more high speed. And of course, in these cars, they would be, maybe not both of them flat out, but definitely the second Lesmo would be flat out and make the track just like, pretty much an oval with just a couple corners here or there. So yeah, we'll see if that does happen in the future. But anyway, this is the track, of course, we have for this weekend. Let's now get into my predictions for the weekend. So for qualifying, I am going, of course, Max Verstappen on pole. I know, ambitious. Ferrari will be on the front row. Charles Leclerc, who's always been very, very quick here. Yeah, I think he will be not too far away from Max, and I think there will be a competitive-ish fight for pole position. We remember last year, we all came here expecting Red Bull to get pole, and then Leclerc just pulled out a stonking lap and ended up on pole position. And I think Ferrari actually ended up, was it first and second in qualifying last year, possibly? I can't remember exactly, but I know, of course, they did get pole position. So, yeah, Leclerc, watch out for him. He will be super strong here. He always has been. Of course, he's super motivated by the Tifosi, who will be trying to power the team to their first win of the year. And their first win in 14 months. Alex Albon, yes, I think will qualify in 3rd place. I mean, if he's qualifying 4th at Zandvoort, which, again, theoretically should not have suited them as much as it did, and they should not have been as quick, rather, around that track as they were, then I absolutely think this is possible. 3rd in qualifying. It will be close, though, between him and Carlos Sainz, because, again, I do think Ferrari overall will be the 2nd best team this weekend. But I think given Albon's form at the minute, he's one of the top few performing drivers on the grid. The Williams team as well, they're in great form. And the car, fundamentally, is just a good, solid car. And, of course, has a really big main strength of its straight line speed. I think Albon, ends up qualifying in third place. And then you got Carlos Sainz in P4, Lewis Hamilton in fifth, just ahead of Sergio Perez in sixth. Once again, Perez I expect to be quite far off in lap time compared to Max. 6 tenths of a second I think it'll be, which around a track like this, given, again, almost all of it's flat out, is unacceptable to be that far off. But that's how I think it will be. George Russell will be just behind in 7th. Piastri, I'm going in 8th, ahead of Lando Norris. And the reason that is for 2 reasons. One, Oscar has been very quick here in the past. He took pole and won the feature race in Formula 2 2 years ago. And Lando Norris, this is not one of his better tracks. Of course, was slower here than Ricciardo in 2021. Which, of course, cost him his maiden win. And even when he was teammates with Carlos Sainz, in 2019 and 2020, this wasn't really a strong track for him. So I don't think Lando is going to be necessarily at absolute peak performance. That's why I've just about put Piastri ahead of Lando in qualifying. 8th and 9th, I think it'll be for McLaren. And in P10, Logan Sargent. And that's purely, I think, going to be because of the Williams pace, not because Logan is quick enough to be in the top 10. And I think he'll just about put it in front of the Aston Martins of Alonso, Stroll, Hulkenberg. Probably will be in Q2. And then, probably one of the Alpines, you have to imagine, as well. So, and if I got to say, if Logan ends up still 6, 7 tenths of a second, something like that, slower than his teammate Alex Albon this weekend, again, given how this track is basically just flat out, then that is just embarrassing. I don't care if he's a rookie. It doesn't matter. You can't be that far off your teammate around a track that, for a driver, and a Formula 1 driver, is really quite simple. But anyway, that's my qualifying prediction. Here's my race prediction with the gaps, predicted gaps. And you can see really with those predicted gaps what battles there will be really to look out for in the race. Max Verstappen will win the race and break the record for the most consecutive wins in a row by a Formula 1 driver. Of course, he's equalled Sebastian Vettel on 9 and just needs the the win this weekend to make it 10. And then you got Leclerc second. I think he'll comfortably finish in second. I just don't see anyone behind him really giving him too much of a fight. Sergio Perez will come back to finish in third because of one, obviously we know he's normally quicker in the races, and plus the Red Bull car should be pretty quick compared to the rest of the field. Alex Albon, though, will be very quick on Sunday and will just miss out on the podium. But I would not be necessarily shocked if Perez finished behind Albon in the race, or if Perez had a really tough time passing Albon in the race. So, we'll see how, of course, it goes. Carlos Sainz will finish in P5. With Hamilton 6th, Russell 7th, Lando Norris in 8th, just ahead of Oscar Piastri 9th. And Fernando Alonso will finish just about in the points in P10. But just over a minute he'll be behind Verstappen. This track for Aston Martin should be really their worst track on the calendar, because none of the strengths of their car will be shown really this weekend. So that's my qualifying and race predictions, guys. Let me know in the chat whether you agree or disagree. Make sure to post your, top 3 if you want in the chat. And also make sure to vote in that poll of, do you think that the Williams F1 team will end up on the podium this weekend? Again, in my view, it is absolutely possible. But I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's a 60-40. type chance. I'd say it's probably at best for Williams a 50-50 as to whether they get the podium. Of course, Sergio Perez being quite a bit slower than Max will help that. Plus, if Carlos Sainz is, not really that quick or that close necessarily to Leclerc, that also will help quite a bit. So yeah, make sure to let me know in the chat your thoughts on that. And of course, what do you call it? There is some other news to actually get into, and I may as well just get into it now before we go any further. There has been some news about a driver who has renewed his contract and will be staying at Mercedes for the next 2 years. Let me just get it up on the screen quick. And there you go. The team, this is Mercedes earlier announcing on their Twitter. The team is delighted to announce that Lewis and George will continue to lead its driver lineup in 2024 and 2025. So there you go. Hamilton and Russell, the driver lineup until the end of this current era. Until we get to, of course, the new power units in 2026. Of course, it is interesting that, they've got Hamilton and Russell, of course, until the end of 2025, because Lando Norris, his contract comes to an end at McLaren at the end of 2025. So that is really perfect timing for Mercedes if they want to make if they want to replace one of those drivers, say if Hamilton does retire, if Russell, isn't performing well enough, say he is now, and if that keeps up for the next couple of years, then of course, that would be a great option to replace Russell. So yeah, that's the biggest takeaway for me from that news is if they do want Lando Norris, then it's perfect. They've lined it up perfectly to get him in the car starting in 2026 if they need to replace one of their drivers. So we will see what happens there. Of course, we have other driver lineup situations to sort out. The two Ferrari drivers who are out of contract at the end of 2024. Leclerc, a few days ago, actually said he's not signed his contract yet. So, that's still up in the air. Carlos Sainz, we've been hearing, possibly is looking to move to another team. Possibly, if not probably, the Sauber team, who will become Audi, of course, in 2026. So there's that to sort out. And then you've got Aston Martin, of course. Their driver lineup's not necessarily going to be settled for Alonso, given how old he is, even though he's performing, absolutely well enough. McLaren, Oscar Piastri on your man on your screen. He's he's under contract until the end of 2024. Maybe if an opening comes out at Ferrari, maybe Oscar will make the jump there. You never know. But yeah, Mercedes, same driver lineup until the end of 2025. And I think it is definitely the right decision to keep that lineup because they do have Mercedes, the strongest driver lineup in Formula One. The only driver lineup out there that I think rivals it is McLaren's for talent. Ferrari's is decent, but I don't think Carlos Sainz really is performing at that great of a level to really be, on the same level of Russell, Piastri, Norris, Hamilton. So, yeah, great news for Mercedes. Obviously, great news for Lewis Hamilton fans. And to be honest, I am happy that Hamilton is staying around for another couple of years at least because he is, he's the GOAT. Greatest of all time. And I want him to be in Formula One for another 10 years, 15 years if he can, and if he wants to. And if he's, physically and mentally able to, would be great if he could stick around that long. Because he's been so great for Formula One. So, yeah. let's hope he continues for much longer. Same with Fernando Alonso, of course, and all the other drivers on the grid. But let's now get into the teams, and let's get into how I think the teams will get on this weekend at Monza and get into a bit more depth with these teams. Red Bull, they should be the stronger team this weekend. I think really in terms of the car compared to Ferrari in qualifying, what will decide it is Red Bull being quicker in the middle sector where you've got a couple very important corners. You've got obviously the second chicane and the two Lesmo corners as well. So I think Red Bull's extra pace through there will just about decide it in qualifying. To be honest though, even if Max is second or even third, he's going to win anyway, isn't he? He's unstoppable. He is literally inevitable, is Max Verstappen. Nobody can stop him. He is by far the best driver on the grid right now in terms of his current performance. He's going to break the win record this weekend. It's going to take something very surprising to stop him. Obviously, engine failure, mechanical failure, whatever you want to call it. If that happens, then, obviously that would stop him getting the record. Red Bull, though, have been so reliable this season. I don't think Red Bull have had a DNF in 2023. The last DNF Red Bull had was... God, when was it? I can't remember when it was. Red Bull's last DNF. That's actually incredible. I'm just thinking in my mind, when was the last DNF? And I'm going back to about midway through last season. When was it? Was it Austria? Yeah, it was. Austria last year, I think, was their last DNF. It would have been Sergio Perez, I think, after having a collision, maybe? With, was it Sainz or it was Russell? That's who it was. And then later on he retired, I remember it. Yeah. Austria 2022 was their last DNF. That was, by the way, that was the last race Ferrari won 14 months ago. Just crazy, innit? How reliable Red Bull are. It's, even though these cars are way more reliable these days than they were 20 years ago, the F1 cars, to have no DNFs, I'm pretty sure that's true, no DNFs in almost a year and a half is incredible from the Red Bull team. It is truly incredible. So, yeah. Maybe we'll get a memorable moment like we got with Ayrton Senna back in 1988. That'd be a special, wouldn't it? If Max, for whatever reason, had to retire from the race and then Ferrari ended up taking the baton of the race lead and ended up winning their first race in nearly a year and a half. Of course, at Monza, that would be just incredible. Maybe there I've just written the script for what we're going to get this weekend. Let's hope. Let's say we get something that memorable. But yeah, Max is going to win the race, no doubt about it. Again, in qualifying, it doesn't really matter where he qualifies because the Red Bull car is just on another level with its pace in the race, especially compared to Ferrari, who, of course, we know have their issues with the tyres. So really, for Red Bull, the most interesting area to look at is Sergio Perez because, again, his lack of pace will probably see him around 4th, 5th, 6th on the grid, meaning he'll have quite a bit of work to do. One, to complete a Red Bull 1-2, which I don't think he will be able to. But even just to get onto the podium, it is going to take quite a bit of work to have, Perez on the podium for the Red Bull team. Because, again, Alex Albon and the Williams is going to be absolutely on one this weekend. Both Ferraris should be quick throughout the entire weekend. Lewis Hamilton, we know, has always been very quick around here. I'm sure he will be in that fight to a certain extent. So Perez is going to have quite a bit of work to do, and he cannot afford any, speeding in the pit lane or any, rubbish like that, like we got at the end of the Dutch Grand Prix. So poor from him, getting that penalty. And he got it, the speeding in the pit lane, because he couldn't slow down enough coming in to fit the wet tyres before the red flag came out, or when the red flag came out. Maybe you could say it's unfortunate for Perez because the track was, in horrible condition, but there were other drivers that pitted as well, and they didn't speed in the pit lane, so, it's only him that had that issue. So yeah, Perez going to have a very tough time, I think, to get onto that podium, given how competitive Albon, Sainz, Hamilton, or Leclerc will be as well. But in terms of the win, of course they're going to win. It's going to take something quite special and monumental to stop the Red Bull train this weekend from winning their 14th. Would it be 14th? Or will it be 15th? It'd be 15th win in a row for Red Bull if they were to win this weekend. And yeah, for Max, if he wins, that'll be 10 wins in a row. Most wins in a row for a Formula One driver in history. So this could be quite a special weekend we look back on in terms of, history breaking. And of course, with Max, with the form he's in and how incredibly quick this Red Bull car is, I don't see a Grand Prix where this run of his could end. It really is going to come down to, will the Red Bull team have an engine, or not an engine, a mechanical failure rather, I should say. That's really what it's going to come down to, because Max should have the pace to win every single race remaining this season. Maybe there'll be a couple qualifying sessions where he might not be on pole, but even if he's not, he'll probably still win. But the only race on pace that he might not win is Singapore, but that would require a stunning lap from, a Hamilton, Alonso, Norris, someone like that. And then because of how difficult it is to overtake in Singapore, maybe then that stops Max from winning every remaining race this season and just continuing this mental run of his. But, if nobody can stop him in Singapore, then I'm not sure anyone can stop him, period. So, yeah, we will see if he can do it officially this weekend. I'm 99.9% sure he will. Let's go on to some more interesting teams, though. Mercedes, they did have a bit of a disaster in Holland. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Their strategy of staying out there on the dry tyres just wasn't really the strategy, they should have gone for. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a terrible strategy from them to try and stay out a bit longer on the dry tyres. Because, for Alex Albon, it didn't actually hurt him too much. And, after a few laps, it did dry out enough for the people on dry tyres to start being the quickest cars out there. But of course, they did give up a lot of time on track because of that. So, the point I'm trying to make is I can see both sides of the coin. I can see why Mercedes decided to keep both cars out there. I think, did they keep both cars out there or one car out there? I can't remember exactly. But I understand why they were on that line of thinking, because looking at how quickly the rain came and went, I think going into the race, not knowing exactly how long exactly it was going to last for and the intensity, I think, it wasn't necessarily a bad strategy to follow. But I can see the driver's point of view of, well, we need to be on the right tyres at the right time, and we could have not lost, say, 20, 30 seconds in the race from just paying for the inters. I can see their point of view as well. But, they ended up with a decent result at the end, considering what they had to come back from. This weekend, they should be the quickest Mercedes-powered team. They do tend to be the best at power tracks out of the Mercedes-powered teams, which is not really a surprise, is it? Because they're, of course, the works team themselves. So, yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton, given how competitive he normally is here at Monza, I'd be very surprised if he's not top 6 on the grid this weekend. George Russell was very close to him on pace last year in qualifying. Of course, Russell ended up on the podium. Hamilton had to start from the back because of a grid penalty. So, yeah, those two should be very close on lap time this weekend and really should be, separated in the race, probably only by, I don't know, second and a half, couple seconds or so, really throughout. But Hamilton, I think, will beat Russell because, again, Hamilton is just about the quicker driver around this circuit. And I think Hamilton, after having a poor weekend in Holland, obviously qualifying, his pace was just off. The race, I thought his performance was actually quite good. But, of course, because of just what happened in the race, he didn't end up getting really that many points for what was, I think, a good performance. Of course, if he had started a bit higher, that would have helped. I started 13th in Holland. Yeah, I think this weekend will be back to his best. And as you could see with my prediction, I think he'll finish in 6th with George Russell in 7th. That would be a solid, 14 points for the team, which around a track that isn't really going to favour them, I don't think would be that bad of a result. I think Mercedes are really looking forward to the two Asian races of Singapore and Japan really to start getting back on the podium and scoring big points again. We'll see how they get on there. But yeah, this weekend, I mean, I've written down here on my notepad the pecking order, which I think it will be this weekend. And I've got Mercedes as 4th best team behind Williams. So maybe they can sneak into being 3rd best team if Williams are not as OP as I expect them to be, but we will have to see, at least in practice tomorrow, just how it's all shaping up. But let's now go on to Aston Martin. Not much to say about them, as I've said already. This track's not going to suit their car. They've got a new floor on the car, which has helped their pace, but this track is all about straight line speed. So, yeah, they're going to be pretty slow. I've got them written down as the 6th best team this weekend. At least for qualifying, it should be that. Maybe even worse if Haas can, be a lot more competitive this weekend than what we saw a week ago. But, yeah, the best I can see for them is Alonso getting into the top 10 and maybe ending up, 9th. I'd be very surprised, despite Lance Stroll being normally very competitive here, I'd be very surprised if Lance Stroll ended up in the top 10. And in general, it's going to be a struggleable weekend for Aston Martin. But if you are an Aston Martin fan, don't panic, because as we saw in Holland, the car is definitely a bit better than it was before. And in Singapore, Aston Martin are going to be pretty competitive. Not enough to fight for pole or win the race, but in terms of the podium, yeah, they should be pretty quick. Let's now go on to the Ferrari team, who, had a disaster, really, in Zandvoort. Carlos Sainz, at one moment, was running in 3rd place. Then it all fell apart and he dropped to 5th. And was lucky to hold on to 5th because Hamilton, at the end of the race, was pressurizing him quite hard for that P5. This weekend should be a lot better. As I said during last week's coverage, this week's race is going to be really their best race of the season. Not just because, of course, it's the home race, but because the track layout suits the characteristics of their car the best. So, Ferrari, 2nd best team, I feel. I think this weekend will go pretty much like the Austrian Grand Prix went, where in qualifying, Leclerc will be close to Max, but just not close enough or good enough to get pole. And then in the race, Max and Red Bull will just be too quick, and Ferrari most likely will just secure at least one car on the podium, say in 2nd. But really, I think Ferrari would be right in aiming for second and third from this Grand Prix because, again, they should have the second best car here. And as long as Carlos Sainz is performing to a good or even decent standard, and yeah, I think second and third from this race should be really the aim. And if they were to get that, that would be 33 points, which for them, given the season they've had, that'd be massive. And that'd probably, well, it would put them ahead of Aston Martin in the championship and put them not too far away from Mercedes. Because I think Ferrari at the minute are what? 54 points behind. So, if the result was to end up the way I predicted it, the gap would go down to about 35 points. So, would make that a little interesting. So, yeah, Leclerc, I think, will be second in qualifying in the race. He's always been competitive here. Carlos Sainz, if they're going to get a double podium, it really depends on, the Carlos Sainz we get. If it's going to be the bang average Carlos Sainz we've had this season, then he'll end up performing how I've predicted him to perform, which will be 4th in qualifying, 5th in the race. If he performs, though, a bit more like we saw in the second half of last year, where he did definitely make an improvement, then I think probably does end up finishing in 3rd. But we will see, of course, if he can do so. Albon, Perez, Hamilton, maybe Russell are going to be his main competitors this weekend for 3rd on the grid and 3rd in the race. But yeah, Ferrari should be at the very least on the podium here, and let's hope they can have a strong race for their home fans. One thing I've got to say, I don't know if Ferrari have got a special livery this weekend, but if you guys, do you remember, guys, that special livery they had last year? I've got it actually, the livery in the thumbnail of this stream. I really hope they're running that again, because that livery last year was probably the best special livery I've seen them run ever. And honestly, I think they should have that as their proper livery. The yellow was so nice, especially with the yellow Ferrari writing on the rear wing. So, yeah, I really hope they're running that this week. And I don't think they are, though. So that's if that's true, that's gonna be disappointing, because that was so nice to see last year, and especially I thought the race suits were really nice as well. But anyway, let's go on to the last front running team, which is McLaren. And yeah, McLaren also strategy wise, they performed really the same as Mercedes did. Again, they were right in at least trying out the option of staying out on the dry tyres and hoping the shower just passed very quickly. And it did pass quickly, but just not quickly enough. But then they ended up, just losing too much time, unfortunately, from that. And, once they properly got into the race again, obviously Lando Norris, came into the pits. I think Piastri stayed out and stayed on his soft compound tyres. I believe he did. Yeah, it's hard to remember, to be honest, because there were so many pit stops in those first 2-3 laps. But yeah, with McLaren this weekend, I mean, we've seen with McLaren before, they do have a bit of a draggy car, and we know what their strengths and weaknesses are. So at best, I've got them 5th best team. Maybe if Mercedes are having a bit of a struggle, they'll be 4th best team. But realistically, I think they'll be the 5th best team, smack bang in the middle of Mercedes and Aston Martin. Again, as I said earlier, watch out for Oscar Piastri, because, was very competitive here a couple years ago in F2, got pole position, and then won the feature race. And as I said, with Lando Norris, Lando not had that many great Italian Grand Prix, not one of his strongest circuits. So, yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there for Piastri to get one over Lando, at least in qualifying, and make the head-to-head look a bit more competitive. We'll see if he can do that. But where I've predicted them to be in qualifying the race, which I think is 8th and 9th for both sessions, I think that's about right for where they'll be. But quickly, before we move on to the midfield, let me come to you guys in the live chat to see what you guys have to say. Yeah, let me know in the chat what you think is going to happen this weekend, and I'll just go through your comments quick. Just wanted to say, though, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we've got plenty of content coming up over the next few days. I'm going to be live tomorrow night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and on Monday night as well. Lots of content coming your way. And here is the next two live streams. So tomorrow night, I'll be doing my Italian Grand Prix qualifying preview. Friday, the 1st of September, again, that's tomorrow, live at 7 p.m. UK time. Just a bit earlier than normal because I don't want to clash with the football that's on a bit later tomorrow night. And then on Saturday, I'll be live for the Practice 3 F2 sprint race and qualifying watch along live from 11:15 a.m. UK time all the way through to 4:30 p.m. Make sure especially, by the way, to come along to the F2 sprint race watch along, because it is the penultimate sprint race and penultimate F2 weekend of the season. And of course, that championship fight between Pogacar and Vesti is going to go right down to the wire. And then, of course, on Sunday, I'll be live 12 p.m. till 4 p.m. And then on Monday, should be live 8 p.m. UK time to go over, really, what we've seen in the last couple Grand Prix. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for that. And as well, for watching, smash the like button. Of course, it does help the channel grow. We're currently on 17 likes. Let's try and get 25 plus if we can in the next few minutes. Or really by the end of the stream would be great. We're not far away, to be honest, from the end of the stream. Just going to whiz through in a few moments the rest of the teams, and then we'll come to the end here. Crystal Racing saying Alex Albon ready for world domination. Yeah, I cannot wait to see what he's going to do this weekend. What would be funny is if tomorrow in Friday practice he's, quickest of both sessions. That would be just so good going into qualifying. It'd be exactly what we would need to really get us excited, I reckon. One thing I am going to do quickly, just look to see what the weather is like this weekend. Should be dry and sunny like it normally is in Italy. Right, so tomorrow, dry and sunny. Saturday, dry and sunny. Slight chance of rain around lunchtime. Only like maybe 20% at most. And then Sunday, hot and sunny. So no chance of rain this weekend, to the dismay of McLaren, Aston Martin, and Mercedes fans. Darth Lord Raven says, "Hey Chazza, how are you doing? Zandvoort was the best Grand Prix. Was the best Grand Prix from the season so far, right?" I don't think it was. And by the way, I'm doing well. Hopefully you're doing well as well. I don't think it was the best race of the season so far. It was the most dramatic. There's no doubt about that. It was the most dramatic, but it was not, in my view, the best race of the season. I think Austria was probably still, if you look at the entire race, I think Austria was probably the best race of the season. And Austria was I gave it, like a 7 out of 10. And then with Zandvoort, I gave it a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. Again, there was some dramatic moments, but overall, it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was a great race. But again, in terms of drama, you could say absolutely it's the best race of the season. But I tried to look at the actual quality of the entire race rather than, drama or, just certain parts of a race being great. Let me just look at some other comments here. Darth Lord Raven at my prediction saying, well, this is pretty optimistic. It is, but I mean, look at last week. I thought Williams would be toiling around at the back, and they ended up starting on the second row of the grid. So one of us are going to be idiots come Saturday or Sunday. Josiah says, if you get into Q3, you're quick enough to be there. Let's not be so harsh on Logan. I wouldn't say that's necessarily true, to be honest. For example, if you are Perez or not even Perez, if you're driving a Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and at the moment a McLaren, then it's not really an accomplishment, is it, to get through to Q3? And I think, given how quick I think Williams will be this weekend, and again, I think they'll be third best team overall, I don't think he'll be necessarily that much of an achievement if Logan does get into Q3, especially if Albon is up in third or even higher. And that's why with Zandvoort, again, credit to him for getting into Q3 for the first time in difficult conditions. That's really only why I gave him credit. But again, in terms of the pace difference, it was still not a good performance on when it came to that aspect. And if he is, again, 7-8 tenths of a second slower than Albon around this track, which is 80% full throttle, that's a poor performance. It just is. Doesn't matter where he ends up. Same goes for Perez. Same goes for anyone else who ends up that far behind at a track like this. It just can't happen. Especially when everyone is running the same setup, which is, least downforce possible. Josiah says this is a race where nobody's talking about Mercedes and they'll end up somehow finishing P2 and P3. I'd be extremely surprised by that. Hello, by the way, to G Walker. Bully Pulpit, I think, says Monaco had more drama. Yeah, maybe you could say in certain aspects, but I think the two most dramatic races this season were Melbourne and Zandvoort, and then probably Monaco in third. But again, drama doesn't necessarily mean quality. Greg Martinez thinks it'll be Max, Checo, Sainz for the top three. Interesting, you've gone for Sainz there instead of Leclerc. Willafon Games says, I can't quite see Albon fighting for a podium. Top six more realistic. Laurie Rastogi says, I reckon Alfa Romeo the slowest car in qualifying at least. I mean, between them and AlphaTauri, it's going to be basically, a shit off, as I like to call it. A contest of who is the shittest team. And Laurie also saying Alpine have never gone well at Monza besides 2019. They were slightly wrong on that. They were very quick here in 2020 as well. They just didn't get the result really that their pace deserved. And I think we're a bit unlucky with how the race played out with all the safety car and red flag stuff in that race. I think Ricciardo was running in like 5th place. I think he might finish in 5th as well. And yeah, on a different day, I think Ricciardo probably ends up on the podium there. But wasn't to be. But yeah, I think what we'll do now, guys, is move on to the rest of the team. So then we'll just wrap up the stream. So let's come off of McLaren. Let's now go on to the Alpine team. And you can tell Alpine are going to be very slow here because, well, they have been complaining recently to the FIA that their power unit is not quite equal enough with the other power units out there. And they want to be allowed by the FIA a bit of development time to increase their horsepower. So, it can make it a bit fairer because, of course, at the minute we have a freeze on engine development until the start of 2026. So Alpine, who believe they're about 30 horsepower down on, say, the Ferrari power unit, they believe they're a big disadvantage. Haven't heard anything on that in terms of that being agreed upon, that Alpine can get their power unit up to standard. But that whole story, I think just, again, it's an admittance from Alpine that this weekend they're going to be shit slow. So, yeah, I think they'll be probably 8th best team, maybe even worse. The only benefit, really, for them is that they've got 2 drivers who most of the time are pretty decent here at Monza. But other than that, yeah, it's going to be a pretty slow weekend from them. I'd be very surprised if they ended up in the points. They're basically going to be this weekend like they were back in like 2017 era, where, because back then they had a car that was, so slow in a straight line compared to a lot of the other teams. At these type of tracks, they just couldn't hope to compete, and that's basically how this weekend is going to go for Ocon and Gasly and the Alpine team. By the way, Mattia Binotto, the infamous ex-team principal of Ferrari, is at the Grand Prix this weekend. Of course, it is the Italian Grand Prix, I know, but it is rumoured that Binotto, of course, is going to be taking over as team boss of Alpine for next year. So we will keep our eyes peeled for any news on that. Maybe this weekend the deal will be agreed. Next up, Williams. As I've said, I think they are going to be 3rd best team this weekend. Alex Albon is in the form of his life. He is in such great form. 7th in Canada. What a result that was. Nearly grabbed a point in Austria. Then finished 8th at Silverstone. Was 11th in Hungary around a track where really Williams should not have been anywhere near P11, and he wasn't actually, in terms of time, that far away from the Aston Martins, or the Aston Martin at least of Lance Stroll, who did end up in P10. Spa, at one point, despite starting quite low down on the grid, he was running in, I think, 6th or 7th place. And then, of course, at the Dutch Grand Prix, 4th in qualifying, and then 8th in the race. Probably should have been a bit better than that if it wasn't for a bit of bad luck, which I think was due to I think the rain probably coming at the wrong time, especially at the start of the race where he did struggle quite a bit. Got to say as well, another great thing that I want to mention about Albon's race in Holland was not only did he stay on the dry tyres at the start, but he did a mammoth stint at the, in that race. And he only did 1 dry pit stop. And then, of course, when the rain came again, he obviously made, I think, a couple more pit stops after that. So, yeah, what a race from Albon to grab such important points for the team. And really, he is one of the star performers from that midfield pack of, say, drivers this season. Yeah, Albon, he's the driver to look out for this weekend. I would be surprised if he was lower than 6th, honestly, given what we've seen from him as of late. And I think definitely top 5 is on. And I think, yeah, 3rd in qualifying is what he'll get. And he'll just miss out on the podium, but I think it's possible. And I really hope he can get a podium, because that would be such an amazing result for the team. 15 points for Williams is, that's like winning 3 races in a row for them, given what they've been through in the last few years. So, yeah, if it's possible, if it truly is, once we get into practice, if, it's showing performance-wise that is a possibility, then if they can get that, then wow, what a weekend that would be. And yeah, for Logan Sargent, given how simple this track is for drivers, he cannot be as far off his teammate as he has been. Needs to be really 2 to 3 tenths of a second off. Any more than that, once you start getting to half a second or more, I'm sorry, it's just not good enough. So I need to see a big step up, because there is talk going on about Logan possibly not being at Williams next year. And to be honest, with his current performance level compared to Albon, I don't think he deserves to be on the grid next year. Because you can't be 6-7 tenths of a second per lap slower than Alex Albon. No disrespect to Alex. He's at the minute probably one of the top, 12 drivers in the world with his current performances, maybe you'd probably say top 10 at the minute, given what he just did in Zandvoort. But Albon is not, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton. There's not that excuse of, well, my teammate is an all-time great driver. It's Alex Albon. No disrespect. Alex is more like a Sergio Perez or a Carlos Sainz level of driver at the minute. And those types of drivers are not the absolute elite in Formula One. So, if he wants to survive, if he wants to stay in Formula One, he's going to have to improve quite a bit, because Mick Schumacher, as we know, is swimming around trying to find a seat for next year. And of course, with the Mercedes reserve driver deal that Mick has, plus James Vowles, obviously used to work at Mercedes, now Williams team boss. Definitely that possibility of that happening, Mick going to Williams, it looks very much that it could happen. So, Logan has to step up, because his Formula One career might not be lasting much longer. Haas F1, last week in Zandvoort, I can't even explain why they were so bad. They were absolutely horrendous, crashing all the time, so slow. They were just absolutely horrendous. They didn't have a bad race performance in the end, but it was horrendous from the team in the end. They brought a new, front wing and front nose cone, but didn't do anything for the performance. In fact, it made them seemingly worse compared to what we've seen earlier this season. Given this layout of circuit, you'd think they'd be better off, but really interested to see whether that really poor performance from last week in terms of pace, if that continues here, because then that does indicate that this upgrade hasn't necessarily done what it needed to do for the Haas F1 team. So, we'll see on that. But they really should be, after the top 6 teams, they should be best of the rest. Better than, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, and AlphaTauri. We'll see how they get on. The two drivers, Magnussen and Hülkenberg, have never really been great around this circuit. Hülkenberg's had a couple decent results here. Points in, I think, his first ever Italian Grand Prix in F1. And he did finish 5th here in 2019, but was beat by his teammate Ricciardo in what was a very strong Renault car that weekend. So Hülkenberg is going to be the main man for Haas. We'll see if they can perform a lot better. Alfa Romeo, their car's just not suited to low downforce circuits. And even with the high downforce Zandvoort track, they didn't really do anything last week, did they? Alfa Romeo are going to be terrible. The only thing really to look out for is possible, the drivers possibly pulling out a special performance. Zhou did actually end up in the points last year. It was a great performance by him to get there. And Valtteri Bottas, of course, has been pretty quick here in the past. So maybe that can help drag this Alfa Romeo car into a promising position. But most likely they'll be maybe getting one car just about into Q2. But definitely they'll be very much at risk of getting both cars knocked out. The first part of qualifying. And the same really goes for AlphaTauri. Liam Lawson, of course, what a debut, beating Yuki Tsunoda, despite, of course, Tsunoda having damage and all of that stuff going on. Which, by the way, looking at the replay of what happened between Tsunoda and Russell, Tsunoda was at fault for that collision. I don't think necessarily deserved a penalty, but Tsunoda caused the collision. He ran wide and ran into Russell. But what do you call it? Lawson, I thought, had a really good race. Of course, he finished, 13th? Had a Magnussen and Hülkenberg as well. So it wasn't just his teammate with damage that he beat. It was also the two Haases. Good race. And of course, he'll be racing this week. Daniel Ricciardo still isn't over his injury. I think he's still in Spain recovering from the operation. Maybe Ricciardo will be back in Singapore, but most likely, you'd imagine it'll be the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. So, let's see what Lawson can do now with a full Grand Prix weekend. Because if he can come here and beat Tsunoda on pure performance, that would really get people talking. That's exactly what you need to be doing. I mean, look at Nick de Vries last year for Williams. Even though, in hindsight, the Williams car was just OP that weekend, de Vries delivered the result for Williams and got us all thinking, got us all talking about, de Vries being on the grid. Then he got his chance, obviously was terrible, but, got onto the grid. So if Liam can put in a performance that gets people talking, then that's where he can possibly get the traction needed, no pun intended, for a Formula One drive for next year. Of course, it is possible that he'll be on the grid next year. It really depends on Daniel Ricciardo and what he can do when he gets back into the car. And of course, depends on what Sergio Perez does at Red Bull and all of that stuff. So, yeah, we will see. But AlphaTauri should be one of the slowest teams. So I'm not expecting Liam Lawson to be, in the top 12, even 13 on the grid. That'd be quite an amazing result if he was to get it. AlphaTauri definitely one of the teams out there praying for rain. And yeah, guys, that is it if I just go back to the start. There you go. That is it for this 2023 Italian Grand Prix weekend preview. And let's now, let me just quickly remind you guys again, the next two pieces of content on the channel. So tomorrow night I'll be live at 7 p.m. UK time for the qualifying preview, where we'll go through what happened in practice 2, look at how the teams, how their performance is looking so far, and also go through any upgrades. Of course, because we get the official release of who has brought what on a Friday. And then on Saturday, it'll be the practice 3, F2 sprint race and qualifying watch along. Saturday from 11:15 a.m. UK time. Well, we'll be live all the way through until 4:30 p.m. And then on Sunday, live from 12 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts for the race watch along. And then Monday, I'll be live for a weekend review technically, but really it's going to be a review of the last couple races. And yeah, that'll be live 8 p.m. on Monday night. Just wanted to say as well, unfortunately, I mean, it's not completely settled at the minute, but unfortunately, looks like I will probably be solo for the race watch along on Sunday. Nib, not sure if he's going to be joining me. To be honest, I don't blame him if he doesn't join me, because I'm not expecting the race this weekend to be really that exciting. But yeah, looking at, because I've had a chat with him, looking at what he's got going on, chances are he's not going to be on the stream this weekend, but I'm pretty sure he'll be around for Singapore and definitely Japan, because obviously that's great time wise for him, because he's pretty much on that time zone. So yeah, most likely it'll be solo for the race. But anyway, let's hope for a bit more of an exciting weekend than I expect, and as dramatic a weekend as we got at Zandvoort. But guys, thank you very much for coming along for this weekend preview. Make sure to join me tomorrow for the qualifying preview and all the content over tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And before you go, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Smash the like button before you go. Let's try and get as many likes on this stream as we can. And make sure as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 if you want to keep up with content on this channel. And if you want to get notifications of my videos, a great place is my Discord server. Link below in the description. You want to keep up again with content on the channel. But guys, until tomorrow night's qualifying preview for the last European race here at Monza 2023 Italian Grand Prix weekend, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.